Hey there, guys. This is Yakkin with Nick. I am your host, Nick Hazelton. And, so I wanted to, I kind of wanted to catch up on what I'm doing. I've been starting my research project for the history of my local area, and it's been fun, but it's intensive, so this will be I think this should be the last time I talk about it before I release anything. But I just wanted to say, because I talked a little bit about, I'm going to do local history, that'll take a little bit longer than I thought, maybe because there are a lot of resources that I have to locate them. There aren't very many, but I do have to find them. Because I found one, which was really cool, written by a local archaeologist. I believe his name is Dr. Bronner. About, I don't remember what it was called. It was a book. It was a very interesting research project. And it was really cool. Really, really, I don't know, just full of awesome information that I have been looking for. So I was really excited about it. Anyway, I've been reading that, and I got a little bit to talk about for the history of Oregon today, but not in the sense of history. And yeah, anyway, so I don't have much history for you guys in the near future, and I hope that's not a problem. But I hope that people are interested in this, because I've gotten a lot of encouragement to do this. People are interested in the history of this area, and not only that, but the culture and the now of this area. And so I'd like to, while I work on the past, this history of this area, that being Kings Valley, Hoskins specifically, and then on out to the Willamette Valley and the Pacific Northwest and shit like that. Sorry, it's something my grandpa doesn't like it if I say. It's not like, here's the thing about a phrase like shit like that. You could say stuff. You get the same message, except it doesn't have that connotation of people don't like swear words. Which isn't my fault that people like swear words, but anyway. So, yeah, guys, let's see if I can get you more stuff in the about right now in the Willamette Valley, and hopefully I can do some more interviews with locals, because that's fun. And I've got two that I'm like, that just need to be scheduled. One, I'm waiting for somebody to do some research for me on the history, right? And then I need to talk to a musician, and I need to do some research on his music, because I want to listen to his music before I talk to him, because I feel like it's kind of shitty if you're like, hey, I'd really like to interview you because you do music, and then you like join them, and you're like, they come on your podcast, and you're like, so what kind of music do you make? Right? Like, that's kind of rude. I should know that by now. So anyway, that is all in store. But today, I thought I'd talk about a big one, because I'm reading the history of the native. Fuck, sorry. I'm reading the native fuck. So sorry. Try not to bring that much attention to the mistakes I make. I'm reading the history of the native peoples of Oregon. I'm sorry. And it's pretty brutal. It's pretty sad. A lot of the history of the Native Americans in this country is pretty sad and pretty brutal. I want to talk about that a little bit. But what kind of like brought some of these ideas to my mind is this latest hardcore history episode that Dan Carlin released, called Painfotainment, I believe, talking about people's, historically people finding enjoyment and entertainment in people's pain, other people's pains, in the form of something like public executions, which could be pretty freaking brutal, all the way from like hanging to drawing and quartering somebody. Like, I could... Anyway, so his point was that people had these, and not only that, but people liked them. This wasn't just like some brutal shit that the government did just to scare people. It was that, but at the same time, people loved it. Like, people liked seeing that shit. Like, and that's, ooh, like, could you imagine watching somebody get torn apart by all four limbs by horses? I can't watch that. I can't hear that person screaming. I could not handle that one bit. And I know that because I can't handle extreme violence or watching people, like, I don't know. I guess what I'm imagining is the one time I heard somebody like let out what I thought was a death scream, and I'm imagining that, but like way worse because it's so much more painful than getting tossed by a yak, being drawn and quartered. I can't imagine that. I really can't, and I don't want to ever see that myself. So what, like, and this is Dan's question too, is why do people enjoy that? And why are we different now, at least in this area of the world? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just don't get it. Like, where does this fascination for violence and watching somebody die like that come from? And Dan Carlin got into some interesting stuff that I won't touch on. It was a really good show, and I think I'm going to re-listen to it because I thought it was really interesting, and I think it's an important thing to talk about, and there's some important questions to go along with it. Particularly this show made me think about all the other brutal things that some of our ancestors have done that now we all look down upon, right? An obvious example could be like, and there aren't very many people whose ancestors probably were responsible for the Holocaust, but that's an example. There are certainly ancestors of people who were in the Holocaust on the other end of that, who were not Nazis, the Jews, right? There are a lot of these examples, and I'm of these terrible things that other people have done, and I'm reading about the history of the native peoples of North America, particularly here in Oregon. That's a pretty terrifying example itself, and it's much more close to home for me and probably many more of you. So I thought I'd talk about kind of maybe this is a disconnection from brutality, I guess, that a lot of us have, that I certainly have. Because not only can I not like imagine like killing somebody for a public execution, like I can't imagine seeing that. I can't imagine watching that. And I can't imagine being one of the settlers that was like, yeah, fuck the natives. Let's get them out of here so we can have that land. I certainly cannot understand the people who, in effort to remove those natives, killed many of them, raped many of them, and destroyed their way of life. I can't imagine that. Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, rape for one thing. I can't imagine that. I can imagine murder a little bit to the, like, because I feel like I shouldn't say that. Like, that's one of those legal things. You shouldn't say that you've thought about killing people, and I haven't. I've never done that. But you know what I mean? You can kind of imagine that, but I cannot imagine having a desire to rape somebody. That I don't get. So it's like it makes me angry when I read this history, because it makes me angry and really sad, because it makes me mad that, like, why the hell would anybody do this to these people? What? Like, I get that the Native Americans were not the most peaceful people, and it's not like they didn't do murdering and raping of their own. But like the systematic destruction and concentration of those people on those reservation camps, that's freaking brutal. Like I feel like that's a little overboard, quite a bit overboard, right? And it doesn't, taking over a continent for the sake of what, manifest destiny, I don't know, to claim the West for God, maybe that's where it comes from, I don't know. Maybe that's the difference. And I just don't believe that's what God's telling us to do, right? Take over the West. But I don't imagine that. But here's the thing, is about like all of these things, I have to realize that like that I'm a human being, and so are they. And I don't really know if there is a distinct difference between, or what it is, I should say. There's obviously a distinct difference between my psyche and one of these people who put Jews into gas chambers, right? There's something different about us, right? I don't have that. I don't know. Maybe not though. Like, here's the thing: is there's something different there, obviously, but is it more than circumstances, I guess, is what I'm asking. Is it more than just, hey, my family is going to get killed by the Nazi guard if I don't do this? If I don't do my job, I'm getting executed, right? Yeah, that's a different circumstance, but even compare like the white settler to me, right? There's a difference in the psyche of the guy who says, yeah, we need to remove the natives because I want this land for myself. Or, and I feel like I'm simplifying that too. Like, that's not probably, I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, the question is it just circumstances? Is that different? Like if we took, like, think about yourself. If you were put into Nazi Germany, or if you were one of these townspeople in Oregon, and the government was considering rounding up these native people and putting them on reservations, and many people were talking about how terrible and savage these natives were, and seriously talking about annihilation, and real removal of the native peoples. There was discussion of that in Oregon in the 1840s and 50s, especially the 50s, I believe, is when that's when the homesteading acts came into be, where people were able to get their donation land claims in Oregon. That's when the white settlers came pouring in, and that's when they started saying, "Hey, these natives that are here now need to go." What if you were one of those people? Like, it makes you wonder, right? Like, I feel like I'm one of these people who, if I had the opportunity, if there was this new frontier that no person had ever been before, here we go. But that's kind of how the white settlers were thinking of it right back then, I think, maybe. I would be one of those people that are like, hell yes, I need to go out there. I need to go climb some mountains and discover the Northwest Passage. I feel like I'd be somebody like that. Maybe not. Who knows? But yeah, like, I think that I would probably be a settler back then. Like, I probably would be one of these homesteaders. That's what I'm doing now, right? But I'm just not discovering new land or taking it from natives. It's more likely, or more accurate. But would I kill the natives? Right now, I don't think so. I'd really like to think, but that's because I've built this philosophy of, this is what I would do in these certain situations. I've thought about the stress points of where I would be really put to the test of my morals. I've thought about it, like what would drive me to kill somebody, and I've decided at this point that greed is not one of them. Like, I don't think that I'm going to. I don't think I'm capable of killing somebody over, I want your land, or I want what you have, or even you're a problem, you need to go. like the only point where I'm like, you need to die or I want to kill you is you did something terrible to somebody that I know, or yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, but man, it makes me wonder. Would I be one of those settlers back then? And just to be clear, not all of them were against Native Americans. Plenty. I read this in this book I was reading that supposedly there were plenty of people who did not care about the Native Americans who were like, yeah, dude, they're here, they don't bother us. Yeah, man, we don't mind them. And especially when they were starting that reservation, when they were getting it set up for the natives and working out the deal, when Congress approved of the coastal reservation in Oregon, many people were upset about it, and the media and stuff. It was very anti-reservation and very anti Native American, and some people died on the way to those reservations, right? But because people were killing them, right. That's my point. There were a lot of people who hated these natives, and there even is a pretty strong, is that the word? There is a significant history of the Ku Klux Klan in Oregon. So, where how many I don't know, but those racist tendencies are there, and were there. Maybe they started with the settlers not liking natives, and then black people. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. I'm not one of them. So, I don't know. Oh well, yeah. My point was that there were plenty of people who were like, yeah, we're who lived near the reservation. There were people in the valley that are like, yeah, fuck these native people. They need to die, or they need to stay where they came from, or blah blah. But at the same time, it's like they want them to move because they want the land where they came from. Anyway, they don't want to give them. They didn't want to give them the coast, but it happened anyway. So but many people did oppose it, but supposedly there were many, many others that really were at the least apathetic towards the new reservation and native people being moved throughout the land there. And yeah, I guess, but at the same time, there were plenty of that of the hate. There was just plenty of hatred, right, towards these people. Yeah, and then again, would you be one of those people? Like, what does it take to get there? I don't know. I don't know what it takes to become one of those people. But I don't know, man. Like, obviously, this isn't something that you and I are probably used to. Like, we hear about racism and we hear about these ideas, right? But I don't think that, at least people listening to this show, are really familiar with racism, like deliberate hatred of another race. Like I'm familiar of little things like white people saying the N-word and saying I don't know, using that word derogatorily, and but I'm not used to like people saying, yeah, let's kill the natives. That I don't get. I have a disconnect from there, and my guess is a lot of you do too. Because it just hasn't happened in this century, or it just hasn't happened while we're alive, and I guess the question really is, yeah, and I'm going to say it the last time. This is the last time, I promise. Is do you think that you would be one of those people who on their way over here decided to displace Native Americans and potentially support the killing of them? And maybe it's not in like, yeah, it's from anywhere. Like most of my family, I don't think my ancestors really were involved in this a whole lot. The genocide of the Native North Americans. most of my family came from Europe in the 20th century during the Industrial Revolution. So after all of this had happened, but I do know that the Hazeltons came pretty early on in American history before America was a thing. The United States, I should say. In the 1630s, the Hazeltons came here into Massachusetts to Salem, and I wonder what happened to the natives there. Did they do anything there? I don't know. I don't know a thing about the history of Massachusetts exactly at that time. But then my Hazeltons moved to Ohio. And I do believe at the time they moved there, which was in the 1700s, that there were natives there. I believe that's where Tecumseh is from. If you're not familiar with that, you read up on your Native American history, fool. Yeah, but anyway, as people were driving down it's my parents. They're here. Sorry, I'll keep going. But yeah, a lot of my family came. But yeah, this is what I was saying. But yeah, I think at the time when the Hazeltons were going into Ohio, there had to have been some natives there. And it's weird to think about, and I don't know for sure at all. Maybe my ancestors stayed out of the violence. I don't know, but I mean, how many at least approved, and how many actually benefited from it? And let's not include the people who did it, who approved of it, and how many actually benefited from it. And I think all of them benefited. They lived on the land taken from those native people and their ancestors, right? The natives died of European diseases and were killed by superior military forces, while all these white people took the fertile ground and abundance of natural resources. So yeah, I would say there was a benefit. But like, I don't well, is that white privilege? Because there aren't Native Americans who I do not know for sure if they lived in this valley that I live in now, but I have reason to believe that they probably did, because it's a nice valley. It's relatively close to where, I don't know, it's a good river. There was a Lucky Mute band of the Kalapuya natives, and they must have traveled up this way. But the reason why I'm able to farm here is because the people who well, like somewhere along the line, somebody had to have got this land from a donation land claim, or bought it from the government or something, a Homestead Act. I don't know. Sometime along, like, I don't know when this area was first homesteaded, but before then there were natives. And if it weren't for those natives being rounded up and brought over the mountain, I wouldn't, I probably wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have this option to use this land. And because my family was free and white, they got to come here a little bit earlier than others. And it's not true. I shouldn't. None of my family came over on the Oregon Trail. All of my Oregon history is within the last year or so. So yeah, is that white privilege? Is the fact that I get the chance to have this, and the people who lived here 300, 400 years ago don't, because of what happened. And it's, I don't think that it's all about race, right? It's not because these Native Americans were Native American or had red skin. It's not because these white people were from Europe and had white skin. It's random chance that Europeans developed superior technology to the Native Americans here, like, based on all their ancestors' decisions. It comes back to, like, well, these monkeys decided to stay in Africa. Well, yeah, I guess we were humans by the time we left Africa, supposedly. So these Neanderthals were decided to stay. These Neanderthals went up to Europe, and these Neanderthals went out east to Asia and then North America. And that's where it starts. And it just so happened that whatever the unique circumstances in Europe and Asia allowed them to develop very complex societies and ideas and technologies. And then just so happened to be that, well, I have a theory. I don't have a theory, but if you're not familiar with this, there is a hypothesis, let's say, that the Chinese discovered America in 1421. Look it up, 1421, the year China discovered America. But anyway, by circumstance, the Europeans got here first because we had the superior technology and the desire to find the Northwest Passage and the way around the world, man. I guess. Is that what we were into? Did they believe the world was flat back then? I don't know. No way. They didn't. Nicholas Copernicus was around in like the 1160s or something. So I don't think it's fair to say that it has anything to do with superiority, right? And I don't think but yeah, I don't think that it's fair, right? And it doesn't make any sense to me. It has nothing to do with, hey, these people are better than anybody else. You got the better chances, and I think that what you find out, and this is empirically true. I think when if you take primitive people and you bring them to the I just realized as I was bringing up that example, what I was going to say is that if you bring these primitive people out of the primitive areas and you try to teach them technology, that they're pretty quick to do it, and that might be true. But I've also heard that it's easier to go back for people to go back to the primitive world than it is for primitive people to be brought out, which is interesting. But anyway, my point is that it's not an IQ thing. But is there such thing? But there is a pretty distinct difference. At least there was between. Nah, that's not even true either. Shit. As I keep talking, I realize that what I'm saying doesn't actually. I don't know if it's true. The problem is like it's so okay. Let me start over. Let me say this. I think that it's clear that white people on average have an advantage over others, right? In the sense of our circumstances are better. Like they're just more enjoyable, they're more clean, and they're more productive in terms of we make money and food and stuff. I think that's man, call me out on whatever bullshit I say, guys, but you get what I'm saying? Like there's that advantage, but it comes from the history of what our ancestors did. We took over a fucking continent and took it from another group of people. That gives you a pretty big advantage, especially from the old world, and that's why particularly the British had an advantage, and then the Americans, right? This is why this privilege in the world comes about. Is do you see what I mean? I guess I feel like I'm having a hard time describing this, and I don't know if it's fair to call it privilege, but it's definitely something that I didn't ask for, and you didn't ask for, but it is an advantage over other people historically, and even in this world, if you really are the benefit of that history. Because maybe you aren't. Maybe you're a poor Irish kid living in Boston, and you don't have a farm like me. Maybe you don't benefit from the colonial past of America. But it's interesting to think about, how do you benefit from it? And maybe that's really what people are talking about when they're talking about white privilege. It doesn't have to do necessarily with the world is just easier for you because you're white. It has to do with, it's more complicated than that. It's not black and white like that. It's, listen, these people, perhaps your ancestors, did terrible things in the past, and they ended up on top because of that. Or maybe they didn't do terrible things. They just made smart decisions and got to a place that was beneficial and kept their genes alive and sturdy, right? So I don't know, man. but it's a good, I think the point that I'm trying to get to is that there's two of them in this episode. It's both that terrible shit happens because people do it and because people can be terrible, and you have to watch that, and you're a person too. I mean, you have to keep that in mind, and then think about how has that really affected the future, or this current time we live in now? The future of what was then is now. Yeah, I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? Do you think that that's a nuanced view on white privilege? I don't know. It's just one of those thoughts I had as I was reading the history of the Native American people of Oregon. I just thought about it. I was like, wow. A lot of the things that these social justice warriors say, I don't like. I don't like their rhetoric. I just don't like a lot of the stuff that comes from the progressive left. But as I've taken less of an ideological stance on it, and I've looked at it just from not trying to prove a point, but just trying to learn history and look at how have things happened and how do things happen, how do people's minds work. I'm finding a lot of interesting things coming out of those cultural debates, and I think that people are missing sides of the story because of inflammatory rhetoric from all sides, from the alternative right, from the social justice warriors to the people in between, right? I feel like there's not a lot of true thought on these things. Like, the reaction is to white, saying something about white privilege is, no way, I'm not privileged because I'm white. I've had struggles in my life too. And that's true. But were you one of those white people whose ancestors came in and killed all the Native Americans? Maybe you should acknowledge that. Anyway, that's all I've got for you guys today. I kind of hope I pissed you off. But if you didn't like this, write me. Let me know what you think, because this is a discussion. I'd like to talk to you. It's called Yakkin with Nick, not Yakkin by Nick. So hit me up, yakkinwithnick@gmail.com. That's YAKKIN @gmail.com. That's not, it's YAKKIN with Nick @gmail.com. I'm sorry. And then you can join our Facebook group, and you can interact with some other listeners and myself. If you go to, it's in the show notes. The link is, because it's like a long string of numbers, but Yakkin with Nick feedback group, you can find it there and in the show notes. If you'd like to support this podcast, I'd really appreciate it. I'm actually making a positive amount now, which is really cool. I'm breaking $2 a month because of the patrons. So thank you, folks. I really appreciate that, honestly, because it means I don't have an expense for this podcast now. And that really is amazing for me, because it's always been that way. So anyway, if you'd like to join the Patreon, I have some extra content there even. You can go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/just Yakkin. JUSTYAKKIN. And that's it. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will talk to you next week.